How is everybody? Happy St. Patty's Day. Oh. So you can see, I'm Joe Marini. I'm a Principal PM here on Windows Phone. You can see I've used my incredible clout as a speaker to secure the much-coveted last hour of the last day. Thanks for coming out. I'm glad you guys could all make it. Who went to the attendee party last night? Everybody? Yeah. Attendee party? Cool. All right. So let me get started. Basically, this session is about the rich mobile web. Let me get the slides going there. This is the agenda that we have for today. How many people are developing mobile websites today? Yeah, all the hands go up. That's like, and who breathes oxygen? Yeah. And doing it for the last 6 months? More than 6 months? More than a year? And spending the majority of your time on it? Oh, we lost a few there. Okay. So this is I used to ask that question at other conferences I've done, and it's interesting to see how the hands trend over the years. It's good to see that the mobile web is really taking off. It's just exploded. So in this session, what we're going to be talking about, I'm going to start off by talking about the mobile context, a little bit of preaching to the choir there. I mean, it's probably why you're here, so I can probably spend not too much time on that. I've got some code to show you guys. The slides will be posted for you to download later. So I'm just going to go ahead and just get right into it. I'm going to request everyone please keep your arms and legs with you until the sessions come to a full and complete stop. And then I'll be around. I'll be around for questions. I see that there's mics, so if you have questions, come up and ask. Joe, why'd you code it that way? Joe, when can I have a phone? Joe, what's that smell? Whatever questions you might have. All right, so we've come a long way in the mobile web, right? Anybody remember this? That was the mobile web, not too long ago, right? Good old WML, nice 160 by 160 screen, keypad, directional pad. Typing was a lot of fun, that kind of stuff. It's from that to that in 5 years. I mean, that's actually less than 5 years probably. So it's an exciting time to be in the mobile web. There's a lot of stuff going on. I pulled this chart from a report that Morgan Stanley did on the mobile web, and so I know it's kind of a bit of an eye chart, so I'll explain it a little bit. The green bars are desktop internet traffic. Starting in 2000 and going for the 9 years. The gold bars are the mobile web traffic, but the time scale has gone forward 9 years. And you can see that it's projected to outpace where the desktop web was in 2001. That's going to be this year. It's projected that, and the growth curve is just going to skyrocket from there. So again, you guys probably already know this, but I just found this graph really fascinating just to see how quickly the mobile web is growing compared to where the desktop was. So I'm just going to start off talking in the first part a little bit about design, guidelines, concepts, that kind of stuff, and then we'll go into some code. So one of the things that's fascinating to me about the mobile web is that it's fundamentally different from the desktop, and not just in the physical sense. There's a higher order differences as well. On the desktop, you've got a full keyboard, right? You've got an accurate pointing device. You've got a nice, multiple monitors sometimes, really powerful machines. On the mobile side, you don't have the same kind of capabilities physically, right? These represent physical differences, but these differences lead to important differences in usability. So, for example, if I'm a typical desktop user, chances are, even if I'm a laptop, I'm probably sitting down somewhere, right? I'm in a fixed location. I'm not, the lighting conditions aren't changing on me. I'm not going in and out of tunnels, usually, right? It's good for a multitasking context where I've got lots of windows open and I can divide my attention among multiple things, stuff like that. You're focused, you're comfortable. The mobile user is usually just that, right? They're mobile. So the mobile web is usually used in a place where the person's on the go. They want glanceable information, right? No one's going to sit down and book a vacation trip on their mobile web, usually. There's not to say that no one will do that, but that's not usually the case. Typically, mobile web users are focusing on a specific task that they're trying to get done at that moment, right? I want to check in for my flight. I want to know what the weather is. I'm not just doing open-ended browsing. And usually, right, they're doing something else at the same time. So, for example, I don't know, I'm standing at a bar and I'm trying to move money from savings to checking so that I can cover the bar tab or whatever, right? You're not focused on the task necessarily. It's usually an adjunct thing to what you're doing while you're doing it. And these are some really key differences, and it affects the way that you want to design your website so that users, when they're using your mobile site, they can get their job done quickly. This leads to different expectations, right? Mobile web users just have different expectations out of a website than they do of a desktop one. Typically, they expect immediate access to information, right? They don't want to have to sit around and wait for 10 minutes for things to download. They want to go to the site, get their data, and be done. They expect that websites will be augmented by real-time information, like time of day. If I'm trying to book movie tickets, I'm probably booking a movie for the future. You shouldn't be showing me movie times for the past, unless you have a time machine. I wish I could have one, but things like that. So environmental conditions also vary pretty widely. Lighting, background noise, things like relative privacy. This guy standing here in the airport he might feel differently about checking his bank balance if he's surrounded by a ton of people, right? Or on a bus or something like that. So those kinds of considerations you have to take into account when you're building a website that's going to be used by people while they're mobile. All right, so let's talk about how that affects some of our design guidelines. So to begin with, you should always design for one web, right? Design for one web. Yes, there's a mobile context, there's a desktop context, but design for one web. What that means is give users the same information that your desktop site is, give users the same information regardless of what device that they're using, right? Don't lock people out because they don't have device X. That's not what the web is designed for. Now, notice I'm not saying that you should give them the same presentation, the same experience, right? But if I have a less capable device, I should still be able to see the information in a way that it makes sense to me, even though I might get a richer experience on a more capable phone. Design for the finger, not for the stylus. Now, let's be clear. I come to praise stylus, not to bury him, right? Lots of styluses still out there. But the good news is that fingers are, they're usually bigger than a stylus. They're typically about, 40 to 80 pixels in size. And so they're more dexterous than styluses are, right? Fingers can flick, they can pinch, right? They can circle, they can do all kinds of things. So they're more dexterous than a stylus is. When you're designing your hit targets, you want to make sure that they're big enough and spaced correctly. Again, because the user's probably walking around, or he's on a bus and it's jostling or whatever. So make sure that the hit targets accommodate the size of a finger to minimize people hitting the wrong hit targets. And if you do this right, then good finger-friendly design usually turns out to be good stylus-friendly design as well, right? It just so happens that the stylus is more rigid, but it's more accurate. So if you design your hit targets for fingers, usually they work. So once again, design for finger, don't design for stylus. Okay, so equally important when designing a mobile website is the concept of focus. You must focus, my young grasshoppers. Focus. Focus is very important. What I mean by this is focus on a few important tasks. Resist the temptation that's going to be there, right? Because this is what happens, right? The client comes in, they're like, we want to get our website mobile. And you're like, okay, great. And they're like, yeah, let's make sure that we get all of our features on there. No, stop, right? Be ruthless about this. Go through your site, pick out what the critical tasks are, and make sure that those really work well in the mobile experience. Because that's what users are after. Make sure that you display the most prominent features that you've chosen to focus on prominently, in newspaper parlance, above the fold. You don't want people scrolling around looking for features, right? You should have maybe 1, 2, 3 features that are important. They should be prominently displayed, so I don't have to go searching for them. Okay. And yeah, basically what I mean by that is it's a blink decision, right? The user should be able to blink and just know what to do. It should be obvious. It should be obvious to the user what to do. All right. One of the things that, even though you have really awesome graphics on things like Windows Phone 7 and other capable browsers, be crisp, be clean, be succinct. Avoid things like background images. Design for pages that have fewer fonts and colors. Why? Because most most mobile devices don't support downloadable fonts, and we don't do that in IE on Windows Phone. So if you use a font that's not on the device, the experience is not going to be what you expect. And if you usability studies show that if you use too many fonts on a page, the user, it's harder to read the information. So use fewer fonts, use fewer colors. If you do use color, don't use a lot of them. Don't use subtle color differences because lighting conditions might make it hard to read. You should avoid things like unnecessary interactivity or gratuitous images. Like, you'll go to some websites, like restaurant websites sometimes, they'll have this big intro screen. And on a desktop site, maybe that makes sense. In a mobile site, it's just preventing the user from getting to your site fast. So avoid things. I mean, you can use jQuery, that's all awesome. Just, don't go crazy with the animations because it just gets in the way. Background images, you should try to avoid those because when they're scaled down to fit the mobile screen, they can become darker, they can become busier. If you've got text overlaid on them, it's harder to read. So avoid using background images. Make sure that you've optimized your content for the smaller screen space, so scale your images down. Use short, descriptive page titles because you don't have a lot of space in that title bar up there, and sometimes the title bar is taken up by other things, like time of day or whatever. So use short, descriptive titles so that the user just remembers what they're looking at really quickly. 20 characters, something like that. You could say a lot in 20 characters, right? I mean, Twitter taught us that. And make sure that you scale your images down too. And this is important if you're using CSS sprites. Like some people, what they'll do is they'll make a nice big image strip for their CSS stuff. Some content delivery networks very helpfully scale images down if they think they're going to be bigger than the screen for the device that they're going to. So if you're using CSS sprites, make sure that you're not using them that are larger than the screen sizes you're targeting because they might come out looking not as you expected. Use whitespace, but don't go nuts with it. Again, you want to avoid the user having to scroll. Whitespace is an important design tool, but you don't want to go crazy with it. Minimize required input. We have a great keyboard on Windows Phone 7, and it's really capable. But entering data on a mobile device, especially when you're walking or moving around or whatever in your mobile, it's kind of time-consuming. It's prone to mistakes. It's prone to errors. So make sure that when you're where you require that the user enter input, minimize what they have to type in to get their job done. Figure out what can you do with the least amount of information. And even if you can't complete the entire task with just a couple of things, if the user can make immediate progress just by entering a few things, then that's good. Provide sensible default values where possible. If your site requires people to type things in, see if you can get away with some default values like drop-down lists or pre-populating form fields, because again, it just makes the user's job a lot easier. You can also do things like use cookies to remember stuff that the user typed in previously. So you can imagine, if someone's typed in their zip code before, just remember that, right? Again, it's anything that speeds up the task of data entry leads to a better experience for the user. Okay, so just quick summary point. Design for one web. Finger, not stylus. Make sure you're focused and crisp and clean. Minimize the amount of input. Let's take a look at an example. Let me bring up the website for Alaska Airlines here, and I'll bring that over so you can see it. All right, so this is the Alaska site. You can see it's pretty busy. It's got a lot of features on it, right? You've got these nice little pop-down menus. That's all really cool. But let's take a look at their mobile site, and I'm going to bring this over so you can see it. All right. Right, same site, two very different designs, right? What's at the top? Flight status, check-in, right? Because chances are you're in the back of a cab and you want to see if your flight's on time, you want to check in, right? So tomorrow morning, I'm going to be doing this, right? I'm going to be on the way to the cab, and knowing me, knowing the state I'm probably going to be in, I want to make sure that the options are right there, front and center. Check-in, flight status, right? I mean, there's other features, but they made the right decision to make sure that the stuff that you're going to do most likely is prominent. Right? The design is clean. They didn't use background images, right? They only got maybe 5, of the most popular features, and they have a link to their full site if you want to see it and so on. But again, very clean, very crisp. Most important features are right up front. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about developing and stuff. All right, so use well-defined standards. Standards, very, very important in web development, no less so in mobile. We have really great standard support in Windows Phone 7 IE, so make sure that you're using standards when you're designing your web pages. We support the XHTML syntax, HTML 401, mobile profile, use things like CSS 2.1. We've got DOM support in there. ECMAScript 3 is basically that's the equivalent of JScript 5.8. So use script. Always specify a doc type for your pages. This is very important because doc types will tell the browser that, hey, I've made this page for mobile. You can use any one of these doc types if you want, mobile profile, XHTML. Some content networks will look at that and try to optimize pages if you say mobile profile, though, so just be aware of that. Usually you can get away with XHTML 1.0. You should be using strict if possible, just because, again, you want to make sure that the pages are standards compliant so that they show up well, not just in Windows Phone, but the other browsers that you're probably targeting. We support the major media types. If you're going to be using images, right, GIF, JPEG, PNGs, video support, just stick to the standards. When you're designing your sites, you want to avoid things that are known to cause problems. So, for example, frame sets, right? Frame sets just cause problems in mobile. They just really screw everything up. The reason for that is because, first of all, frame sets, they take up a lot of space because you got the borders, you got the scroll bars. You add all that up, and you've lost a good portion of the screen just to the controls. So avoid using frame sets. And in fact, in IE on Windows Phone, what we'll do is if we see a frame set, what we'll do is we'll actually expand it out to fit the content so that the user doesn't have to scroll around in it. But just avoid using them. You shouldn't be using tables for layout anyway, because they bloat the code and they make it hard to adapt pages to mobile. So avoid that. Don't use nested tables. Nested tables are just the bane of my existence. They just, they bloat the code up really bad, and they're almost always used for layout purposes. So don't do that. Image maps, I usually say to avoid those because you don't have a good rollover feedback on a phone, right? There's no mouse, so you can't see where the hit areas are, and it's kind of a usability issue. I mean, they'll work, right? We support it; they'll work, but it's just design-wise, I would just stay away from it. We also don't support downloadable third-party plugins or DHTML behaviors in the browser. So don't show the user something that says, hey, download this plugin or whatever, just because it's not going to work. So just some guidance there for that. So chances are most of you probably have content that you want to get onto mobile, right? You probably already have an existing site. You want to get it working in the mobile context. There's a couple of ways you can approach that challenge, right? How do you take content, get it onto the device? So there's the do nothing approach, which basically means I'm just going to give you the desktop site. Usually not optimal, but if you have a simple site, it might work pretty well. If you got like a blog, for example, it might work just fine. But usually you're going to want to do something in the middle there. You might want to do like basic mobile adaptation, and I'll cover that in a second. Basically, there's some meta tags you can put in your pages that say, hey, I've optimized this page for mobile, so here's how you should lay this out, browser. You can also do what's called multi-serving of content, which basically means you've got the same page, and it's going to two different places. It's going to the desktop and the mobile device, and I'll show an example of that as well. Or you can just do mobile-specific design, right? You can just simply direct people to m.yoursite or yoursite.com/m, whatever, right? So usually that approach works really well when your pages they're just completely different in both contexts, and you want to, like what Alaska did. So you just do mobile-specific design and send them to a different place. So I realized I probably should have been clicking this while I was saying all that. So the last option there, the hosted web content. I don't know if you guys caught Mike Harsh's session, but we also built a hostable web browser control that you can put in your Windows Phone apps. And that approach works really well. So if you're building an application that needs to host web content, like the canonical example, like the Times Reader, right? New York Times Reader. It's an application, but the way that they're displaying the web content is they're hosting a browser control inside their managed app. I'm not going to cover that in this session because Mike already talked about it, but it's on the far right. If you're going the app route, you can still use rich web content in your apps by hosting the browser itself. And it's the same browser on the device. It doesn't share any of the content. The cookies and cache and so on are all specific to your app. So we don't share that with the device browser. But you can actually host the browser in your apps. All right. So for basic mobile adaptation, there are some meta tags that you can put in your pages. And what these do is they tell the browser, this is a mobile page, and it's laid out a certain way. I've listed them here in order that they came out in the universe. The handheld-friendly one was introduced by, I think, BlackBerry. Basically, it just says, hey, true or false, this content is, you'll see this sometimes. And some search engines look at that and say, oh, this is a mobile page. We introduced the mobile optimized one, and the content that you give to mobile optimized basically says, here's how wide this page should be laid out on the screen, and that tells IE on the phone how wide to make the viewport, which I'll talk about in a second. The viewport is the viewport was introduced by Apple, and basically it does kind of the same thing. It defines the concept of how big is the virtual web page document and how should it be laid out in the screen, right? So you can imagine the screen is way big, but the document itself might have a much higher virtual width and height, and that's what the viewport tag says. Here's how big to make that virtual document. So this is the viewport, and you can see, if you think of it as a big rectangle that says, here's the virtual page size, you have control over this. If you don't specify the viewport, we'll specify one for you. We'll give it a width of, I think, 1024, because that seems to work pretty well for most desktop websites. But if you know that your site lays out much better for a width of, say, 480 or 320 or whatever, you specify the document width in the viewport tag. So let's take a look at a demo of that, of controlling the viewport. Let me bring up the code for that. And that guy is right here. All right, so let me get this out of the way. All right, can you guys read the code? Yeah, is that big enough? All right. So let me scroll up here. So this is a page without the viewport, and let me get this. There we go. And let me bring the other one up. All right, and this one has the viewport right there, right? So I've said, hey, the viewport has a width of 480, and the other one I didn't specify the viewport. So let's take a look in the emulator for what that looks like. So I'll go to my tabs. So this is what it looks like when you don't specify the viewport, right? So what I have there is I have a fixed div on the top, and you can see that in the design view down here. So there's the fixed div, there's a iframe, and there's a picture down there. I didn't specify the viewport, so it's defaulting to 1024, and that's why it's appearing kind of squished in the screen. So, however, if I say, well, the viewport is actually not quite that size, you see that when I specify the viewport, right, it comes in zoomed really nicely, so that the user they don't have to double tap and zoom and pan and whatever. Okay, let's go back to the slides. All right. All right. So multi-serving of content, basically, I touched this before. It's basically the same page, but you style it differently, and you can send it to different devices, the desktop or the browser. If you're using CSS, this works pretty well. It works pretty well for pages that have been laid out using div tags and styled with CSS with the necessary floats and so on. The caveats here are important. So if you're going to multi-serve a page, use script on the client to check capabilities, not the user agent string on the client. If you're going to do user agent detection, which some people do that on the server. Doing it on the client just slows things down. There's a lot of user agents out there, and it's really not a best practice. Always use script to do things like see if you have a valid DOM. And I'll show an example of this. That way you can tell how rich the browser is. So let me actually show, and I'll get to an example of that right now. Let me bring that up. So let's have a look at a website that I laid out. All right. So this is a page that I laid out using divs, and it's got a pretty typical two-column layout with a header across the top. All right. So two things you notice when you look at this page. First thing, Joe Marini, not a designer. Second thing you notice is that it's got a vertical nav bar on the left there, contents on the right, with a header on top. standard CSS layout. Let me bring up the emulator and take a look at the same. Now, this is the same page, but just being viewed in IE. Okay, same exact page. It's just styled differently using CSS, right? So you can see that the links are now horizontal, right? They're prominently placed. You don't kind of scroll. The content is displayed a little bit differently. The background color of the header is different. So let's take a look at the code for that. Let me bring up the code. Am I doing on time? I'm doing OK. Let's bring up the code. And that guy is right there. All right. So this is the file. And you can see that what I've done is I've applied a CSS class to the body tag. And I've got a separate CSS style sheet that's defined externally, which controls how the body is laid out. So if we just take a quick look through the code here. All right, so you can see this div right here, that's the masthead on the top. And then here, this is the container. This is the content container. So that's the div that outlines all the content on the page. This guy here is the left-hand nav column. You can see I'm using a list to define all the navigation links. And then this is where the page content is. So I've assigned, and there's the footer down there. I don't know if you saw that on the screen before, but there's a footer as well. So what I've done is I've sectioned off all the content using divs, right? Which is, again, that's how most modern layouts are done. So let's take a look at the script for this. All right. So this is the JavaScript code that basically does it. It's the most important stuff is that top 8 lines there. All it's doing is it's checking for the screen size and saying, hey, if the screen width is smaller than this, then assign the class name on the body to body small versus body normal. Now, at this point, someone usually shouts out, but Joe, shouldn't you be using media queries? Yeah, right. Anyway, I'll do it for you. Joe, shouldn't you be using media queries? Yes. So media queries, they are new, right? They're part of the CSS3 spec, and basically media queries say, hey, apply this style sheet if this characteristic of the device happens to be present, like a screen that's only this big or whatever. The problem with media queries is that not all browsers support them yet. So this trick works just as well in browsers that support JavaScript. It does essentially the same thing. And typically, since you're going to use media queries for this kind of thing anyway, this just works in more devices. That's why I did it this way. So let's take a quick look at the CSS. All right. So in the CSS, right? So here's where the class name gets set, right? So let's take a look at this. So here's where I've defined the CSS styles. And what I've done is I've defined styles, I've defined subclasses underneath the main styles for body normal and body small. And when you apply them to the body tag, if you look at the code, you'll see that each one of these classes has the same ID as the appropriate thing in the layout, right? So there's the masthead, there's the container, right? There's the masthead, there's the container. And each one of these just happens to be different for the right element based upon what style sheet's being applied. So you can see in this one, I've got, the point size is larger, I've got a different background color, I've positioned this relatively, this is for things when they're large, right? So that's how I've got some positioning going on. For the small one, all I just did was just define some different properties. What I've also done is, let's see, where is that? Oh, that's right there. All right. So basically, what I've done here is change the way that the nav is displayed horizontally, right, rather than vertically, because again, you want on the phone experience, you don't want people to have to scroll back and forth for nav stuff. Plus, on the desktop version, it was taking up a whole bunch of white space, right? Bad design decision, so that's why I laid it out that way. Okay. Let's see, what next? Oh, yes. So let's go back and take a look at the last thing on the slides there, and that was mobile-specific design. Here we go. So in mobile-specific design, basically what you're doing is you've got web pages that are coded specifically for mobile devices. So this is the point where you've actually gone and said, you know what, I'm going to make a site specifically for a separate subdomain because I want it to be specific to specific design that I've got. This is where you can do things like UA detection. You guys know what user agents are, right? It comes in from the client. You can say, oh, this happens to be a rich browser, whatever. You can roll your own, but there are some really good third-party ones out there. The wireless uniform resource file, the WRFL, is a pretty good one for PHP. We have the mobile device browser file for ASP.NET. Anybody using that? A few people? OK. If you're not using it, it's available on Codeplex. And it's basically it's a dot browser file. And what you do is you put it in your ASP.NET applications folder under app browsers inside a devices directory. And all you got to do is drop that file in there. And once you've done that, your ASP.NET app has a property called request.browser. And off that object, you get something like, I think, like 60 capabilities for what devices support. So you can just simply say, hey, how big is this screen? And it doesn't do real-time detection. It's a database, right? It's maintained. It's actively updated. It's been updated for Windows Phone. So there's really nothing to it. You just simply drop it in the folder. And in fact, I can just show you that. It's right here. Let me bring the window over so you can see it. So inside the app, here's the wroot. Inside app browsers, there's got a directory called devices, and that's it right there. It's pretty big. It's about 6 megabytes. But once it's parsed, it's cached, and the access is pretty fast. So let's take a look at some code that is actually using that. OK. All right. So I'm going to bring up the code for that. And that guy is right here. OK. There we are. All right. So this is the web page. And I'll bring up the design view so you can see it. Basically, I've got a whole bunch of divs in here that have been ID'd. They're right in here. And let's take a look at the CS code. Right. So just by dropping that file into that right folder, I get this, right? So I can ask the request that's coming in, hey, browser, are you a mobile device? And that works for I think that file knows about 1,500 mobile devices. So just by dropping that file in there, you get request.browser.isMobileDevice. And it'll say true or false. And in this case, I've got it redirecting, not redirecting, I'm setting the content based upon what it is, whether it's mobile or not. And I've got some examples here of the kinds of things you can ask. So let's just take a look at this actually running. And this is, there it is. And I'm going to go to localhost. And that is, default.aspx. And going to hit go. All right. And you can see that it says right there it's being viewed on a mobile browser. That tells you what the browser version is, whether it supports cookies, how big the maximum rendered page size can be, what the preferred content type is, whether it's text, whether it's whatever it is. So all of these properties just become available once you use that file. You can do things like easy redirection, right? Response.redirect. And it's freely available. I highly recommend it. Available to you for the low price of $0, 0 cents. OK, one other demo I want to show you guys really quick. And that is how to detect that you're running on a rich browser using JavaScript to do capability detection. And so that is, let's see, this guy right here. So what I've done, let me show you the file. It's a really simple one. So basically, I've got an HTML file here that I want to see, hey, am I running in a rich browser? And what I mean by am I running in a rich browser is do I have things like DOM? Do I have good CSS support for position layout, that kind of stuff, right? So let me bring this up in the emulator so you guys can see it. And that guy's right here. And yeah, all right. So we'll run the test in a second, but basically it's a very simple test. It goes through a whole bunch of JavaScript tests, and then either says, yes, I'm running in a rich browser, or no, I'm not. So I can see that it's running. So that's this function right here. And I just wrote this myself. The code will be posted for download if you want to see how this works. But I'll just walk you guys through it. So click on that. All right, here it is. So what I've done is I've written a function that goes through a whole bunch of progressive enhancement style tests in the JavaScript code to see if we're running in a rich browser or not. So this function returns an object that has a generic like, yes, I'm in a rich browser, no, I'm not. It also has properties that tell you specifically what rich properties you have. So start off by saying, all right, well, clearly if this function is not running and JavaScript is either not present on the device or turned off, pretty safe to say you're not in a rich device, right? I mean, so that's the first test, is the fact that this thing even runs. So if this runs, then yes, you've got JavaScript. So then I check for things like, do I have the modern DOM? So I'm looking for like get element by ID, create element, right? Get elements by tag name. Do I have things like the query selector API? That's a recent addition to the W3C's CSS selector spec, being able to use query selector. So if that's there, then I set a property for that. Then I start doing a whole bunch of like machinations to see if when I style elements a certain way, do they end up as expected, right? So for example, this function right here tests to see if you've got proper box model support, right? So does the box model of the layout match what W3C says it should? So what I'm doing is I create a new div, I put it into the page, and then I set the style, the width and the padding, and then I say, hey, it should be equal to 15, and if it is, then yes, I've got the box model was what I thought it was. Similar approach for positioning. So right here, I then take that div and I position it absolutely at a 5 pixel left, and then I query the property to see if it's 5 the way it should be, and then if it is, I know that I've got good positioning support, and then I get rid of the div because I don't need it anymore. Then I test to see if CSS overflow works as expected. So I create a separate div because I just wanted to get rid of the other properties in the old one. So I put that in the document, and then I put another div inside that one that's styled to a height, and you can see that the overflow is hidden, right? So then once I've got that div in there, I say, hey, I've got proper overflow if the offset height is in fact 10, right? I've got a whole bunch of content in there that just, it should be 10. So then I know I've got overflow support. And then finally, I test to see if we've got AJAX. So the AJAX test basically runs through a whole bunch of ways of, newing up a XML HTTP request object, go through each one of these. If I am in fact able to create the object, then I know I've got AJAX support. And then down here, I say, hey, we're in a rich browser if all of these are true. So, if you want to take this file and modify it for your own use, please feel free. All of this I give to you. Just, maybe put my name in there or something like that to say thanks, Joe. So I just test all these results, and I say, yep, we're in a rich browser. So we'll get to that part right there in a second. But let's go over to the emulator, and I'm just going to refresh the page. Okay, you can say, yes, this is a rich browser. All right, so now let's test the false case. I'm going to save that, go back to the emulator, and you can say, yep, not a rich browser. All right, so quick example of how to do rich browser detection in JavaScript. Okay. All right, how am I doing on time? I'm doing good. Is there a way to tell if you've got touch? Oh, is there a way to tell if you've got? You mean is there a way to tell if you've got jQuery capabilities? Well, you can use the jQuery library in IE on WinPhone. Windows Phone, yeah, it does. Well, yeah. So if you can detect if jQuery is installed, then you've got the $sign property, and if that's present and it's set to jQuery, you can test the jQuery version. Then you know you got jQuery there. Yeah. So, but if you control the web page, then you put jQuery and you don't. Are you asking for like other pages because like you don't know if jQuery is there or not, or?
Well, you can create a mobile. They have a mobile-specific library called QTouch.
Yes, right.
You can create animations, transitions.
Yes, yes. Oh, I see. So you're asking specifically, can you tell if QTouch is installed? Yes, yeah, you can. So jQuery lets you detect specifically what plugin libraries are present. So you just ask jQuery, hey, is the QTouch plugin present? And that works, yeah. Right. All right. Okay, back to the slides. All right, where are we now? Just did the demo, okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about specifically IE on Windows Phone versus IE on the desktop. So what we've done is we've taken IE for Windows Phone and we've made some enhancements to it that are present in IE 8. So for example, we've added some additional JavaScript functions. So you saw that we added the query selector API support. We also added a native implementation for get elements by class name. That alone just speeds a lot of things up. There's a lot of third-party libraries like Prototype, like jQuery, that use that function. And what they do is they do the object detection like I was doing before. And if it's not there, they have an interpreted implementation in their library, which is a lot slower. So we've added a native implementation that speeds things up a lot. We also, as you saw earlier, we added support for the viewport. There are certain properties that we only support right when we first ship, and those are width and height. And they range from 320, which is the minimum, up to 10,000. It defaults to 1024. You can also specify a keyword called device width. If you say viewport, the meta tag viewport, and width equals device width, that just defaults to whatever the width of the device happens to be. So if it's Windows Phone 7, it'll be 480. If it's an iPhone, it's 320. I forget what the Palm is off the top of my head. But it'll just figure out whatever. And same thing for device height. Although, device height, you can specify it, but it just, the height of the document is going to be whatever the height of the document is going to be. It's just going to flow to whatever it is. So, but it's 768 at the minimum if you don't specify it. Yes, it does take orientation into consideration. Yes, it does. We don't yet support the maximum, minimum scale or initial scale. However, you can set a property that says whether or not the user can scale it. Because there might be certain situations where you don't want the user scaling the viewport, so you can specify user scalable of no if you don't want that. I think I touched on the frame set handling a little bit earlier. If you have frame sets in the page, we will expand to fit the content. We also now let you navigate directly to files that end in .xhtml. You won't get that little prompt anymore that says, would you like to save this file? So we added the support for that file extension. What else? We also implemented a CSS property that lets you control how text is displayed to the user zooming. If you have a desktop website and the user goes to the website, what we try to do is we size it according to whatever the viewport might be or how big the web page is, and then IE will try to scale the text so that it's readable to the user. And we have some internal computational gymnastics that we go through to figure out what's a good readability size. However, if you decide that you don't like the way it looks for your site or you want to control it more finely for yourself, you can specify a CSS property called MS text size adjust, or we recognize the WebKit one too. So you can just specify that CSS property either on, like, say, the body or the div, wherever you want to put it, and you can either set it to auto, right, which will scale it correctly. You can set it to none, which will turn it off, or you can specify a percentage, so like 150%, and it'll give you fine-grained control. However, if you use the viewport tag, right, then it defaults to none, because we assume that you've done the mobile layout yourself there. We don't support third-party plugins. We don't allow downloading of ActiveX controls, obvious reasons. And fixed positioning elements behave a little bit differently in IE on the phone versus on the desktop. So if you have an element on the page that's fixed, and you've probably seen this on places like Facebook, they have that little control bar at the bottom, right? And you move the page, you size the page, and that thing like follows the window around. On the desktop, that's the behavior you want, right? Because you want to position something relative to the window. On the mobile IE, we don't attach the fixed position to the screen. We attach it to the document viewport. Two reasons for that. One, it's probably what the designer intended, right? I mean, it's, you know, like in the Facebook case, they put the control bar on the bottom of the content. They probably wanted to stay there. The second reason is because when you do a zooming operation, like when you zoom into the page, everything zooms. So if we had taken the fixed element and left it on the window, that thing would zoom up really big, and you would rapidly run out of screen space. So to prevent that problem from happening, we fix elements to the document viewport and not the screen. All right, so that's pretty much what I've got. I've left time for questions. So what you guys should do, go to developer.windowsphone.com. We've got a white paper up there that goes into a lot more depth than some of the stuff I've covered here. You can follow me on Twitter. I tweet about this stuff sporadically, randomly. You can also visit the blog. We have the IE mobile blog. If you go there right now, you'll see that the last post was about 3 years ago. But we're getting the band back together, so you can expect to see regular updates on our blog. Please fill out the session form. And I've left about 10 minutes for questions. So if you guys have any questions, now is the time.
Hi.
Brave soul, yes. All right. Atari shirt too, sweet. Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, so I see a fair few people wanting to write web applications to simulate native applications going forwards rather than just building Silverlight apps.
Yeah, right.
So a few questions around what can and can't be done for that. First one is, will there be any way of bookmarking something so it can appear as a tile on the home screen, then link directly into a site and control the look and feel of that tile?
Yeah, I think Mike, are we doing that, Mike? We're doing the... Oh, okay, yeah, but he's asking, like, so, like, they have the tag that you can say, like, yeah, no. So we're not doing that, not in the first release. But we are looking at that, though. I know that we are looking at that. You mean, like, you say the meta tag, like, app icon equals this, and it goes on the home screen, right? Yeah. No, we're not going to have that when we first ship. But we are looking at doing that, though.
Sure. Second thing, in desktop IE, you've had all of the CSS properties for button face, info background, so on, so you could give a native look and feel to the web page.
Right.
Are they supported?
I don't think so, but what we're actually the approach that we're taking with that is we're looking at creating we haven't done this yet, but it's one of the things I'm working on is we're working on creating a CSS file that lets you style the components the right standard way, and it will have all of the Windows Phone design system colors in it. Now we don't have it right now, but we're working on it. I hope to have that when we ship because we want to do it the standard way. So, but it'll accomplish what you're talking about, though.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay. Third one then is, will there be a way to turn off, say the ability to scroll and get the URL bar to turn off the buttons that appear?
Oh, you want to turn off the browser? You want to
basically get rid of all the additional Chrome around it, so it looks like a full screen app.
Yeah. No, we're not in the first ship. No. In that case, I think what I would probably do is, like earlier, I talked about the web browser, the hosting control.
Yeah.
You could just make a shim Silverlight app, right?
I'm just trying to think of people that don't want to go through the
app
store for a few reasons.
It's not an ideal solution, but yeah, we're not going to have that at first ship. Yeah.
Sorry to hog the mic.
No, that's good. It's good questions.
So you've got the kind of viewport there, and you're saying that you're not going to be able to dock something to the bottom of the viewport with the whole absolute positioning.
Right.
Is there any way to override that if you were to give it a specific viewport to go, you know what, I know that I'm dealing with the viewport this size, I know what I'm doing, I want this position.
Yeah, no, the way that I would do that is with JavaScript.
Sure, yeah.
There's no way to control the viewport. That's what I would do. Just use scripts to position it whenever the thing moves. Yeah.
And last one, is there any kind of media select you'll be able to give by release date that is an absolute specific, this will target these Windows Phone devices, so I can give it this style sheet without messing around with any...
Oh yeah, the user agent string has been specified. We will post that. You know what? We'll post that on the blog.
So I can do it in a link reference in the document without having to mess about with JavaScript, without having to mess about server sides. It can just be all specific.
Oh no. Not going to have. It won't be a tag support. No.
Sure.
No.
Okay.
You have to do the UA detection on for that. Yeah.
Thanks ever so much.
Yeah. Sure. Thanks. Yeah.
Are there plans for HTML5 support for mobile IE?
So we're working really closely with the IE team. It won't be there in first ship, right? But you can imagine that a feature version will. Did you see Dean's keynote? Dean Hunt? Yeah. So he made all the HTML5 announcements. Right. Well, you can draw your own conclusions. Okay. So yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so it's actually in sequence with this question. What about HTML canvas?
So that's an HTML5 feature. I don't think we made any. I don't have any specific information. We haven't made any announcements around Canvas support. Yeah, I don't have any specific information.
It's just because sometimes this is released as only a subset of HTML5.
Yeah.
Other browsers are doing it.
Yeah. No, but it won't be there in the first release.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Other questions? Anybody? All right. Well, yeah, sure.
Hello. Okay. Just another question around as far as submitting apps. If it's basically a web-based app that we turn into kind of a Silverlight web hybrid, is that okay for the App Store?
Oh, so you're saying? I'm sorry. You make a Silverlight app and you host the browser control content, and you.
So we have already branded. We have some already created QTouch applications that are web-based using jQuery. If we wrap that in Silverlight to make an app we could submit to your App Store, is that acceptable?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, is there any sort of, I guess, plan to? It's an easier point of entry for us instead of diving into C# if we can just, have a PhoneGap style solution.
Yes. Right.
Is there any plans to make a library that would make it easier for
no current plans to do that. No.
Okay. Cool.
All right, thanks.
On the iPhone, we've done a lot of work to reduce JavaScript file size so that they would be stored in cache. Can you tell us a little more about how caching is going to work? Are you going to cache CSS, JavaScript?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. So we do cache resources that come down to the page, and you can also, in the case of things like JavaScript and CSS, I think you can also gzip them as well, and we should support gzipping as well.
Okay, and what's the maximum size of resources in order for them to be cached?
Do you know, is there a maximum resource size, Mike? I don't.
On the iPhone, I think it's like 25Ks or something. So if your file is bigger, it doesn't get stored.
I don't know. I don't think we have. Yeah, it's the same approach that IE takes on the desktop. So I don't think we specify what the minimum size is. No. Okay. We just cache what we can. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Other questions? Anyone? All right. Well, I'll be around, so please feel free to come grab me. And thanks for your time.